Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, or good night, wherever you are on planet Earth. So, I thought I would record this video whilst the experience is still fresh in my mind. I literally decided to do this about 2 minutes before going live. So this is completely spontaneous. So between the 8th of September and the 19th of September, the day I decided to return to the world of social media, I embarked upon quite the mental odyssey, as it were. I attended a 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat. I first heard about this experience 10 years ago, actually. I can remember being on another retreat and a person there was talking about how they attended a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And I can remember at the time thinking, wow, I really, really want to do that. And, you know, life happened. I was only 18 at the time, and I went on to do a number of things. And I just kind of drifted away from that idea and got sidetracked as one does. But then, as many of you are aware, I decided to take a break from social media 6 weeks ago. And because I was in dire need of some kind of perhaps mental detoxification, I thought that now could not be a more perfect time to finally sign up to that course. So I did. I didn't actually get a place initially because you know, the uncertainty surrounding COVID, which was really, really annoying, because I called them up and said, how can I guarantee a place? They said, well, we can't guarantee you a place, you know, but their advice was for me to go to their website 5 minutes prior to the places becoming available for people to apply to them. And so I kept refreshing the page, and then at 8 p.m. on the dot, when one could finally apply for a place, I immediately clicked on the link, and I don't think I've ever filled out a form faster in my life. And I still didn't get a guaranteed place. I was put on the wait list immediately, and they said, oh, you know, so long as we are certain that the country won't get into another lockdown, then we can give you a place. So initially that uncertainty was rather debilitating and irksome. And so eventually I was given a place. So, you know, I was over the moon about that. And I can remember when I first started going to music festivals, I'm rather fastidious when it comes to packing lists. If I see a list of items that one is required to bring to a festival or a retreat, I take it very, very seriously. So I kept on calling up the meditation center and said, how many meditation shawls do I need? How many torches do I need? How many, you know, at one point they briefly mentioned, oh, you might want to bring your own cloth to put over the meditation cushions for you to sit on. And I was researching meditation cloths, and I couldn't really find anything other than like a tarot card cloth. And I called them up, and they said to me, you know, it's cool, just bring one meditation shawl. You don't have to bring a cloth, you know. It's just a throwaway comment, but when I see it there, I have to follow it exactly as it's written down. So yeah, I did all my shopping, and then a day prior, got all my bags packed and everything, ensured that everything was going to be taken care of, you know, work wise. You know, I've got a very efficient team, thankfully, and they assured me that, you know, everything was going to be taken care of, and yeah, I could trust them. And then personally, you know, are people going to look after my animals? You know, I need to make sure that everything is squared away before I am to turn off my phone for 10 days, right? So sometimes things like that can make me a little anxious. I need to make sure everything is as it should be before I can relax and not think about, oh, I didn't do that before I left, and is Freddie going to be taken care of, and oh gosh, I hope that everything's going to be hunky-dory on social media. So anyway, everything was fine. You know, I had plenty of trustworthy individuals to whom I'm very close help me out in that regard. So I then got in my car and drove 4 hours west of where I live in the UK before eventually arriving at the meditation center, which was situated in right in the heart of the English countryside, near the Welsh border. Really, really lovely grounds, beautiful, tranquil environment, conducive to meditation. So the atmosphere was perfect, and they said arrive between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. So I thought, I'm going to arrive at 4 p.m. That seems like a safe time to arrive at. So I arrived at 4 p.m. and that was day 0. And on day 0, we knew that we were going to be turning off our phones and putting them in lockers for the next 10 days, enjoying a light supper, and then heading off into the meditation hall for the first time. Now, when these retreats, I should probably, when they began, identity politics and gender theory was a far less advanced state than it is now, and so they ensure their end that males and females as traditionally understood are kept separate, right? So the whole camp is split down the middle, and it's symmetrical. So males on one side, females on the other side. There were a couple of couples there actually, but obviously in deference to what is required of one during their stay at the meditation center, they are not allowed any contact with each other throughout the 10-day course. So yes, we went after dinner. We were given like a COVID brief and an introduction and everything. And then we were, you know, before that point, I turned my phone off, and renouncing my phone really wasn't that difficult. I mean, I am used to going out and leaving my phone behind, right? So before my inimitable PA, Charlotte, started helping me out, I was so utterly dependent on my phone for work purposes. And obviously, we all know how ridiculously addictive social media can be. And so, yeah, I kind of weaned myself off of that about a month before. There were a few things that I weaned myself off of a month before going to the meditation retreat, because I knew that if I just arrived and gave everything up that I was dependent on the very day, then I would have had a much harder time. So I was rather tactical and shrewd in that regard by giving up things I knew I was dependent on a month before to ensure I had as smooth a time as possible. So after dinner, after the introduction, the brief, we were ushered off into the meditation hall, where we were introduced to the teacher, S.N. Goenka. Now, Goenkaji is no longer with us. Goenkaji was originally born in Burma in 1924 and started his career off as a businessman prior to suffering a series of migraines, which no conventional doctor could remedy. And someone eventually recommended that Goenkaji attend a 10-day Vipassana meditation course. This would have been in the middle of the last century. And then he did, and he greatly enjoyed the results and experienced a reduction in headaches, because clearly the source, the cause of those headaches were psychosomatic. And so Goenkaji eventually became a Vipassana meditation teacher himself and was responsible for spreading the technique, well, to the West, namely. Now, Vipassana meditation is the technique that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, utilized when he reached enlightenment underneath a Bodhi tree 25 centuries ago. And so Goenkaji attempts to convey the technique of Vipassana in its purest form as practiced by the Buddha. Before you are taught Vipassana meditation, though, you have to kind of take an oath and swear on day zero, when you went into the meditation hall for the first time, that you will from that point start practicing sila, which is the moral conduct aspect of the kind of the adoption of dharma, which I'm going to be using a lot of Sanskrit words, which is the universal law, so the sila part is the moral conduct, the precepts, which serve as the foundation upon which Vipassana can be experienced. So the 5 precepts are to abstain from killing, which is which sounds fairly easy, right? To abstain from stealing, which should be pretty straightforward and easy for most people. Now, all of the rooms are left unlocked, right? And I'm at certain points throughout the meditation course, I wondered whether that was because they were kind of testing you out a bit. They were thinking, can we winnow out any potential thieves here? There are no keys to the rooms. Everything's left unlocked. Now, in a Buddhist monastery, the residents are without an ego, and they transcend the concept that you can possess anything at all. So everything belongs to everyone. And that idea does freak me out as an autistic person, because I fucking love and need my personal space, you know. So the idea of total renunciation of the I, to the point of sharing everything with everyone, I'm definitely not at that level, put it that way. Anyway, where was I? So yes, no killing of any being. So you can't kill any insects that come into your room. You know, no killing any spiders. If a daddy long legs, a fruit fly or mosquito, or an ant or a wasp gets in your room, you do not squish it, you do not kill it. You have to somehow find a way to get it out of your room or out of the meditation hall. They left little cups and cards, you know, specifically for the purpose of removing insects from the room and freeing them into the world without damaging them. So no killing, no stealing, no lying, which seems pretty straightforward given that you're not going to be speaking for 10 days. But then on the first day, my roommate and I were speaking about the no lying precept. And he said to me, well, consider how much we may lie to ourselves inside our heads. Consider how much we may exaggerate our achievements and our attributes, because what you find as you go deeper and deeper into yourself is that the idea of the self is illusory, right? That the self is just an image we may have of what we want ourselves to be. And the philosopher Krishnamurti often spoke about this image phenomenon, and how when we get offended or hurt, it's by something someone says, it's because the image we have of ourselves gets dented and contradicted by someone else's opinion. And furthermore, many people seek to establish their desired image of themselves in the mind of others. And when that doesn't happen, people get angry, right? So how often do we lie to ourselves when we misperceive ourselves? When we, you know, you get the picture. So no killing, no stealing, no lying, no sexual activity whatsoever, you know. So that's sexual activity involving others or not involving others. And finally, to abstain from taking, ingesting, or consuming any intoxicants, which is easy for me anyway. I don't drink caffeine, and I have been clean and sober for years now. So this was easy, and I tend to limit my junk food anyway. The food was exquisite. The food was really, really, really good. Mostly vegan, all homemade, and all of the servers, all of the assistant teachers were volunteers. I should mention at this point, the course was completely free. It's donation based, right? And no new students are allowed to donate. You have to wait until you have completed a 10-day course before you are allowed to donate. And some people donate, other people offer their services, other people will volunteer to be a server, other people will volunteer to help out in some other way, right? Now, so you kind of pledge it, you know, you pledge allegiance, you solemnly swear that you will abstain from any of those 5 precepts, right? And then food sounds like Brockwood. Yeah, the food was very Brockwoodian. Absolutely, absolutely. And hello, Emma. So, and then you are taught that. So that's the Sila phase. The Sila is the foundation of moral conduct, the foundation upon which meditation can occur. Well, obviously it can still occur, but it's just to ensure that you are as able as possible, are able to meditate as successfully as possible. So then it's the samadhi component, which is the concentration of the mind. And this is when they teach you Anapana meditation, which could not be more simple as a technique, but to sustain this for 3 days, because you have to do this for 3 days, right? And by 3 days, I mean you are up at 4 in the morning. At 4 in the morning, you are naturally awakened by the sound of the gong. And my room was right next to the gong. And it is quite, I thought at first that's going to drive me fucking spare, but it's really lovely actually to be risen by that sound, and then to hear, you know, the birds singing, etc. So you wake up at 4 in the morning. By 4:30, you begin meditating. And between 4:30 and 6:30, you have a choice of meditating either in your room or in the hall. For those sessions, I would go to the hall for the first hour before going to my room, you know, to break it up in between. And so we back to day zero, you enter the samadhi phase, which is the concentration of the mind, whereby you are taught Anapana meditation, a simple technique, but very, very difficult to sustain for days on end without doing anything but that, right? So it's very, very simple. You focus exclusively on the natural ebb and flow of the breath. The purpose, and not to control the breath, it's not like a Wim Hof breathing exercise. It's not like the fire breath sequence or anything like that. Just focus on the breath as it naturally ebbs and flows. You may notice that it enters your left nostril more than your right nostril. You may notice sensations more at the you know, where the nostrils begin, or more in the center of your nose, or more on your upper lip. You do not alter the course of the breath. You're only the only thing you have to do is focus on the breath as it naturally occurs, naturally ebbs and flows, right? Sounds simple, but try doing nothing but that for 10 hours a day for 3 days, right? And you notice immediately how untamed, how recalcitrant, how Loki-esque the mind is, whether you are an ADHD PDA or not, right? Sometimes I could only focus on the breath for 2 or 3 inhales before getting spirited away by some random, irrelevant thought, right? And then you are not to judge yourself harshly for, well, succumbing to the skittish nature of the mind. The mind does not want you to focus on the breath and nothing else, because hey, there could be so many other more interesting, more exciting, more appealing things to rest my attention on. Like, what do you mean I just have to sit here and focus on nothing but the breath, you know? And I was getting frustrated, and on my form, I see when I applied for the course, I didn't mention that I was autistic, not because I didn't want to, but because they asked me if I had any medical conditions, right? And given that I'm an advocate in the neurodiversity community, I, by definition, do not regard myself as having a medical condition. So when they asked on the day on a form, say a little bit about who you are and what you want to get out of this, you know, and I said, well, I'm an autistic advocate, and I talked about my imposter syndrome that actually led to my decision to take a break from social media in the first place. And I spoke about my hyper perfectionism. And, you know, sometimes when people self-identify as perfectionists, they do so in a kind of self-congratulatory way. And when I talk about my perfectionism, I talk about it as, oh gosh, it is all consuming. It is incapacitating. It can ruin my life. You know, the pursuit of the illusion of divinity outside of myself, mistakenly believing that upon obtaining this mythical concept, my life will improve and then I can be happy at that point. So I wrote stuff like that on the little form. Then by day one, the teacher wanted to speak to me, right? The teacher wanted to speak to me. Oh, I went off on a tangent, didn't I? So S.N. Goenka is the Vipassana meditation teacher that I spoke about before. Started off as a businessman, eventually after suffering from persistent migraines, started a 10-day Vipassana meditation course himself, and became the person responsible for spreading Vipassana meditation as far and wide as possible. Vipassana meditation in its purest form as practiced by the Buddha on his way to enlightenment. And he is dead. He died in 2013, but it was really extraordinary actually, because the course was still being taught by Goenkaji through recordings of him teaching on other courses. And every evening at 7 p.m. there was a discourse, which was a video of Goenkaji. It was kind of like a milestone. It was my favorite part of the day. It was the favorite part of the day for many others as well, where Goenkaji would say the second day is over, you have 8 more to go, and he would talk to you about what you were probably experiencing at this point, and he got it right every single time. Like after the first day, you're probably experiencing a lot of back pain, and you're probably really, really angry with your mind because it's so easily distracted. Why can't you focus on your breath for more than 3 seconds? Are you doing it right? Are you not doing it right? Am I failing? And you can't speak, right? So after day 0, after you exit the meditation, the first meditation in the Dharma hall, you enter what is called noble silence, right? So noble silence means silence of mind, body, and speech. You are not allowed to speak to anyone. You are not allowed to speak. You are not allowed to speak to yourself. You aren't allowed to gesture to other people. Like if 2 of you arrive at a door at the same time, you're like, oh gosh, don't do the English thing of after you, after you. Even just gesturing with your hand is technically breaking noble silence. Meeting someone else's gaze. Don't give any eye contact. Don't say sorry if you accidentally step on someone's shoe. Don't say thank you if someone does hold the door open for you. So yeah, that's not difficult. The silence isn't difficult. I don't really want to speak to people anyway. Giving up my phone wasn't difficult. At certain points, I found I really, really missed certain people on the outside. And when you have no distractions, everything you feel insecure about, everything that plagues you in your everyday life surfaces, and you have nothing with which you can suppress it. So you have to allow it to surface. You have to embrace it. You have to endure whatever the hell it's going to do to you. And then you find, oh, everything is impermanent, and that was a prevailing theme of the course. Everything is impermanent. Okay, so where am I? The story is all over the place. This is going to be this is already very an ADHD rendition. Oh, very, very, very in an ADHD style rendition of this course. So anyway, then you enter noble silence. When you get out of the first meditation, you feel good to go, right? Because it was only for about half an hour. Then by day 1, one of the assistant teachers read my form and saw that I mentioned I was autistic, and so there was at lunchtime there was a post-it note. You're given a place to sit at every day, a seat at a table designated to you. Harry, on the post-it note, please turn over. you are requested to speak to the teacher at lunch at 12 noon. Breakfast is at 6:30, right? So the first meditation, 4:30 to 6:30, optional. Breakfast is at 6:30, and then you are kind of on rest until 8. And I'd usually get back in bed after breakfast. Even if I didn't sleep, you really cherish and savor those moments where you're lying down, right? Because sitting cross-legged for long periods of time really, really, really does become exhausting and taxing. So I would often get in bed until 8, and that's when the mandatory group meditation is held in the main hall. And you all meditate together for an hour, you know. So a recording of Gwenkaji begins playing at 8, and he's chanting. Sometimes the chanting got a bit irritating because I wouldn't describe him as vocally gifted, put it that way. And then you meditate for an hour, you know, and then 11, then you can meditate in your room or in the main hall as according to the teacher's instructions. Then 11 o'clock is lunchtime. And a note was on my table saying, can you please meet the teacher at 12? And I was, my anxiety was raised by that point. And that happened a couple of times, and I actually had to speak to someone. I said, look, like, anyway, I'll get to that point. So I went to see the teacher, and the teacher was saying, and you can whisper to the teacher in during interviews which take place every day at 12. You can sign up to an interview, or the teacher might request to speak to you. And he said, you didn't mention any of this stuff in your application form, you know. And he said, I need to know how I'm going to support you. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm fine. You know, I just said, like, when, because a couple of times they left a note on the desk saying, oh, can you come and speak to the teacher? And I had to say, look, when you do this, when it's vague and ambiguous and you're asking me to do something, and I don't know what it is I'm meeting you for. I said, it's ironic really, because you really, really want to support me because you found out I'm autistic. But, and in a way, fair enough. You've got to appreciate that, actually. I mean, the teacher knew the word neurodiversity, you know, and I was really impressed by that. So fair enough, they were looking out for me. But I said, all of these uncertain, ambiguous notes on the table are whacking my anxiety up. I said, if I have a problem, I will speak to you. You know, I will request an interview. I won't just keep it to myself. I will communicate honestly if needs be. But then I was called back at 6 that day to the teacher's little cottage, which was a lovely little bungalow next to the main hall. The male teacher was on, you know, the male side. The female teacher was in the bungalow on the right female side. And then he gave me a form, you know, and the questions were asking, have you ever experienced panic attacks? Have you ever experienced self-harm? Have you ever been diagnosed with bipolar? Have you ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia? And I was freaking out at that point, going, oh my God, no. Oh God, I have to conform to the Sheila, the moral conduct, abstain from telling any lies. But if I am 100% truthful about my history, then I run the risk of being kicked out. And I was really, really, really stressing out at this point. And I said to the teacher, I don't want you to kick me out. You know, he says, you're not going to get kicked out. You know, he was really nice. I mean, they were so serene and realized, you know, the teachers, like they just sit there in the lotus position with their eyes closed, not moving for hours on end, you know, and then when they speak to you, they're just glowing with wisdom and enlightenment. But anyway, I filled out the form as honestly as I could. You know, I probably omitted some bits, you know, I probably omitted some parts of my past, but I was honest about a lot. And then they came to see me an hour later. You know, one of the assistant teachers said, you know, that the teacher is very happy with the answers you provided, and you know, you don't need to worry about it now. And I was like, oh, thank God, you know. So anyway, 10 hours of meditation a day. Lunch is at 11, and then eventually afternoon tea is at 5 p.m. There is no dinner, right? So the old students who have completed at least one 10-day course in the past aren't allowed to eat anything. They were given lemon water when I was there. And the new students, the people sitting for the first time, like myself, were allowed 2 pieces of fruit every day, right? And I thought I was going to really struggle with this one because I am useless and and completely destructive when I don't eat. You know, you do not want to be around me when I'm hangry. But I was absolutely fine. I mean, one day I even fasted for a whole 19 hours. I mean, I've fasted for longer than that before. You know, I've done plenty of 36-hour fasts before. But, you know, that's when I'm literally, if I have decided to fast in the past, it might be on a Sunday where I have no work and I'm not working out that day. So the activity is minimal. And even though we are sitting cross-legged every day for 10 hours, it requires a great deal of self-discipline, you know, to meditate for that amount of time. By day 3, I was burnt out. You know, the last day of Anapana meditation, I was completely burnt out and my knees were killing me. And I remember going to bed that night thinking, how the hell am I going to manage another 7 days of this? And then day 4, I actually requested to speak to the teacher because, as I said before, my knees were killing me and a lot of people were asking for back supports and chairs. And I was just sitting on a cushion on the floor. You know, most of the time my back was okay, but my legs were hurting at this point. But then I woke up on day 4 and they were fine again. And I saw the teacher anyway, because my name was down. And he said, you know, it's in your head. It's in your head, you know. He said that will become clear eventually. So we were introduced to Vipassana meditation on that day. Now, Vipassana meditation is practiced thus. You start from the top of your head and work your way to the tips of your toes, not missing out a single body part, noticing, objectively observing any sensation you come across. So at the subtlest level, and this is where the whole purpose of the Anapana meditation became apparent, because by focusing on the smallest area, you know, just the breath, can you feel where the breath impacts you, you know, just at the tips of your nostrils, you know, just this upper lip area here, you train your mind to become more subtle and sensitive. And when your mind reaches a certain level of sensitivity, you can feel parts of your body you never thought you could feel without, you know, without touching it. So if I tap my hand now, obviously I can feel that. But if I am, and by that point, they say for the mandatory group meditation, for the whole group hall meditation sittings, 8 to 9, 2:30 to 3:30, and 6 to 7, you do not move. So it's like, wow. And obviously prior to that point, every 15 minutes, you uncross your legs, you reposition yourself, you scratch the top of your head, you open your eyes just to look around the hall a bit. At this point, what, now I can't even move. And it does not seem, it doesn't seem plausible. Like, how is that going to happen? You know, I was thinking to myself, like, I can't sit still at the best of times. I mean, my friends know that when I start talking, I get up and I pace around. And when people are talking to me, I sit there, I rock, I look around the room, I pick things up, I fidget, you know. Oh my gosh, that was so daunting. But you can do it. It's possible, right? And so at first, and I struggled with patience, right? So a lot of the time I could actually experience sensations beyond the gross intense sensation. So your back is going to be aching and your legs are going to be killing you and you're going to want to open your eyes. So, but beyond that, you don't get stuck on one sensation in case you miss out the others. You scan the whole arm, every finger, in, inside the arm, the neck. Can you feel the t-shirt on your torso? Can you distinguish between the fronts of your legs and the backs of your legs? You know, I was thinking, gosh, the amount of autistic people who struggle with introspection, etc., you know, might find this bit difficult or easy in the sense that you don't identify with it. So it's not that, ow, my leg is painful. There's a pain in my leg, and you move on to the next body part. You observe objectively. And now the Buddha believed that all pain and misery hail from three main sources: ignorance, craving, and aversion. And at first you think, what the hell has an itch in my knee got to do with any of my past trauma? And I was waiting for, you know, perhaps a more mindful-esque part of the process, such as focusing on your thoughts. You don't focus on your thoughts. You focus on bodily sensations. You go beyond the obvious intense feelings. You notice subtle like flutterings and vibrations on your skin within you. You can feel your stomach in a way that you've never felt before, right? And it soon becomes clear, you know, oh gosh, I am completely beholden to the whim of desire, right? So if we are transfixed with an object which exists on the outside and we become attached to it, attachment is the source of immense misery, because essentially craving and aversion are two parts of the same coin. If I doggedly pursue something on the outside with the hope of becoming one with it, it means I am averse to who I am right now. And when you have your eyes closed for an hour, it's very difficult to gauge time. How much time has passed? My legs are hurting. And you soon play these mind games with yourself. Oh, I've done 1 lap of my body, 2 laps of my body. Usually after 2 laps, an hour is up. And sometimes you do it faster. I've done 2 laps. When is he going to start chanting? Come on, Gwenkaji, start chanting. I can't sit still for a moment longer. And you realize I am resisting this right now. I'm not being objective. I am overly identifying with the pain in my body. And when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he would have experienced pain. Although he would have said, I am not moving from this spot in order to conquer this complex, you know, the sankhara, it's called, you know, which is the tendency for the human being to blindly react to craving and aversion, right? You do not react, you transcend, you do not identify. It's not your pain, it is a pain, it's a sensation. You move on to find other things. You know, by day 5, oh my gosh, that was the stormiest day for me. I was really, really, really in a state. You know, I was really, really, really struggling. And I went to speak to the teacher on that evening. And I said, you know, I talked about my perfectionism, and I said, I'm so focused on the results and the outcome that I am forever, if I don't achieve a particular standard, I beat myself up. I'm horrible to myself, you know. And he was very wise, and, you know, he said, oh, you know, the Buddha said there are 2 feelings which human beings find, 2 sensations, experiences which human beings find the most intolerable: moral dread and shame. You know, I said, yeah, God, I am infused with both of those things when I feel that I have not met my impossibly high standards of perfection. And he said something that I often tell people on this very page: can you apply perfection to the effort as opposed to the outcome? And I laughed when he said that. And I said, I'm such a hypocrite. I'm constantly constantly telling people to do that. And here I am, absolutely paranoid beyond imagination that I am doing this wrong. And because I'm doing this wrong, I feel guilty, I feel wretched, I feel full of self-judgment, you know. So it's interesting how that seemed to disappear. You know, if I kind of faltered in any way days after that, I wasn't hard on myself anymore. Guilt seemed to have disappeared. Anyway, let's fast forward to day 7. That's when the magic started happening. During meditation, and by this point, I could go a whole hour without moving. You know, the first 1 hour sitting of strong determination, meaning don't open your eyes, don't open your hand, don't uncross your hands, don't uncross your legs. I moved once or twice, and then they see you. You know, they call 6 people at a time to the front of the hall so that the teacher can discuss the technique, check in to see how everyone's doing. You know, asking, you know, are you able to sit without moving? And some people said, oh, I moved 3 times. And he said, that's okay, that's okay. You did the best you could. Next time, try and move 2 times. Then the time after that, move once. And I moved, like, I remember moving twice. I moved twice the first time, once the second time, and then I stopped moving. You're allowed to adjust your spine. You're allowed to move a little bit, you know, but the main movements you have to abstain from are uncrossing your legs, unfolding your hands, and opening your eyes. You know, I didn't really move after that, but by day 7, I thought I was regressing in the morning because I was finding it exceedingly difficult to focus. And if you find it difficult to focus, you can return to Anapana, just focusing on the breath, if the mind is too agitated and skittish. And then I thought I was regressing, and I wanted to see the teacher, you know, to talk about, oh gosh, I think once again, I'm doing it wrong. I'm going backwards. I need to go forwards. You know, I think I probably get this from my dad. You know, that kind of ambitious personality type, wanting good results, you know, and obviously a lot of it comes from trauma because the school system is so results focused. Your worth is based on what test results you produce. No, I couldn't wear my fidgety fucker merchandise, Carly, because you're not allowed any logos. It was annoying because I wanted to wear my fidgety fucker hoodie because it's really nice and warm, because you do get cold. It's sometimes freezing in the morning. Anyway, I went for a walk after lunch, as I always did. You know, I am always the first in line at lunch. And because I eat so bloody fast, I'm the first to finish and the first to go for a walk in the meditation, in the garden. The gardens were beautiful. I noticed I had a routine, you know, because you meditate and then the teacher announces, have a short break and then return to the hall. I had a routine. So jump up, hobble up, because, oh gosh, you are in agony. You know, you're there like, come on, start chanting, an hour must be up, an hour must be up. I'm resisting this. I can't, everything's impermanent. Fuck that. This pain in my leg is permanent. I'm going to experience this pain in my leg for the rest of my life. And then he starts chanting, like, then he's like, okay, have a break, and then return to the hall. You jump up and you're hobbling to, you know, get your shoes on. But then by that point, it just stops hurting. It's like, this is why I don't move, because it stops hurting the moment you get up, right? So whilst you're there in absolute agony, just know that this is not permanent. This is not going to kill me. My legs aren't going to fall off. It's just pain. Pain is a mere sensation. Pain is only temporary. Giving up lasts forever, right? And it's not, I think as a perfectionist, I would kill myself, destroy myself for moving, you know, and not doing it right. Anyway, my routine was get up, go to the toilet, have a drink, and then charge around the garden a few times. Oh, you feel amazing, because it's like when you're looking out into the world, you're actually noticing the world for once. Because I don't know about you guys, but often when I walk to the shops, I'm so not present. I am just away on I don't know where I am, somewhere far away in another dimension in my mind, thinking about everything and not actually enjoying the simplicity of walking and being able to see. You're suddenly grateful, like, I'm actually looking out into the world, tree, grass, path, you know, not people. You're not looking at people. You're not allowed to look at people, but God, I analyze. It's so interesting. You know, you get to know people, or you create a perception of people as you're not speaking and they're not speaking. You know, it's like, oh, the guy that always coughs, the guy that always fidgets next to me. Just stop existing whilst I'm trying to meditate. Look, once everyone just fucks off, I'll be able to find nirvana, I swear. Anyway, day 7, tangents. Goodness me. I went, so the meditation in the more, I felt like I was regressing. Why did I feel like I was regressing? Because I went on a journey back in time to the first school I was at. I was remembering things that I hadn't thought about in so long, starting with the kind of trial day when I was 3 or 4, when I went to that school, all boys prep school, because I could hear this voice saying, "I'm Harry too." And I went, "What? Who, you know, who said that?" And I can remember a boy saying that, who was in reception at the time, and I was a little nursery student visiting, you know, that day, and I was all, you know, I was very, very quiet and shy back then and timid. And then I can remember so many memories. I can remember how I felt. I can remember, obviously, I was top of the class at first, so it's like everything was working out for me. And I can remember all the children being all innocent and beautiful in reception in year 1, and then gradually becoming corrupted and molded, you know, by the hands of the private school education, and detaching from their souls and feeling left behind, because I wanted to retain my innocence and vulnerability. And you can't in that environment, which is why I suffered so much. And I can remember teachers shouting at me and just feeling this horror, this dread, and you know, not wanting to leave my mum, and crying in the morning, making excuses not to go in, and then just being so scared when I was there, just you know, not doing homework, avoiding teachers, just not being able to focus in lesson, not being able to do the work. You know, I've recently had a cognitive assessment, and it showed that whilst my verbal skills are quite high, my processing is really low. My processing and decoding ability is rather low, you know. And I can remember, and a fear of mine to this day, which I don't really experience much now that I'm in, you know, an ideal role for me, but working in normal jobs, it's not just the authority part and the demands that gets you down and, you know, prevents you from even trying. But some days when you think to yourself, you know, I'm going to try today, I'm going to really, really, really give it my best shot, and then a manager at work or a teacher at school are giving you instructions, and you know that you're not processing them properly, and you have this dread, you have this burning hot sensation in your chest that I can't follow what they're saying. The instructions are just too difficult for me to follow. And you fear the consequences of not being able to do it properly. You know, the other children calling you stupid, and the teacher getting angry with you. And I can remember even when rock climbing, I remember one of the instructors was giving everyone instructions, and then he was making a lot of jokes with people, and then he was trying to talk me through the same thing, and I kept getting him to repeat himself again and again. And then he went, oh. Like he did that and then laughed, and I just felt like such a fucking idiot. Like, and I would often have that experience, like people just getting so irate with me because I could not follow what they were saying. And I remember that happening at school. It happened in work, and it was often the reason I didn't want to go in. You know, obviously the demand was there, but that was my second biggest fear, not being able to follow instructions properly, you know, getting things wrong in front of other children. They all laugh at you, and yeah, it's I just always felt like I was just so stupid all the time. Anyway, and so I can remember all of these memories. They were coming back to me, and I remember how I felt. I remember how I felt that I was drowning, I was submerged, and everything the school wanted from from the pupils, I was unable to give. And I just wanted, you know, I always thought my mum was dead. I remember sitting in woodwork. My mum had to be dead. I now need to start grieving. I remember in IT class every week at the same time asking if I could use the toilet, because that would mean that I would walk over, I would walk past my little brother's classroom where my mother would always be first. And once I saw her, so relieved. And I remember the IT teacher saying, "Do you have to go every lesson at the same time?" Like, he was on to me, and I was so scared, you know. And then I just going to the matron's office after break time, not during break time, after break time, so I didn't have to go into the lesson, feigning just all sorts of illnesses to get her to send me home again. I just couldn't cope. And I was angry with my parents, and I blamed them for so long. If you loved me, why the hell would you subject me to that amount of torture? Because I wasn't old enough to understand the nuances. I wasn't old enough to understand how the legal status surrounding children being in education worked. You know, you have to go to school, you know, they'd say. And I couldn't understand why. And I remember the tears, and I remember the fear and the anger I had. I needed to be with my mum. I was worried she was going to die. I was worried she was going to forget to pick me up. She had to wear the same outfit. So I had a routine. So other people were part of the routine. If she didn't wear the same outfit, because she wore her gym kit every day because she went to the gym after dropping us at school, if she didn't wear that, I'd have a panic attack. If her car wasn't in the same place at the end of the day, every day, panic attack, you know. I remember I was feeling it, I was going through it, and I realized how often I intellectualize my childhood trauma. I talk about it, but I realized how intellectual it is. Obviously, I remember how it feels, but the meditations I was doing, the depth I was arriving at, allowed me to re-experience it. And then I just started crying. I was bawling my eyes out on my own in the woods, just crying. And I don't cry a lot. I really, really don't cry very often. And the floodgates were open, and I could see my scared younger self. And I just like fell to his knees and said, "I love you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving you. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. It wasn't safe to be you at that time. Being you was impossible. Being you meant that we were going to fail. Being you meant that we were going to die. Being you meant that it didn't mean anything to be you. You were meaningless in the environment you were expected to survive in. You weren't real. You must have been real. You must have been a figment of my imagination. You know, I was just crying. I was saying sorry. And then I stopped being angry with my parents. I realized that, given the circumstances, given their lack of knowledge, they were doing the best they could. And I was always angry with my dad, you know, because I always felt that I wasn't the kind of son he would have wanted. And I forgave him, and I thought about him, and I thought about my dad recently at my grandmother's funeral, and him crying and thinking about his childhood and how his needs weren't met properly, and how, you know, how damaged he is, how much trauma he has experienced and suffered, and how that would have informed his parenting, which I wouldn't have been able to understand at the time. And trauma is very complex. It's not just about an event, it's about the individual's relationship to the event. And it's also about not being able to comprehend the event as it's happening. As I was a child and I didn't know what was going on, I wasn't safe. And it wasn't that I didn't say to myself, I used to feel unsafe. I said, I'm not safe. And I realized that not feeling safe lies at the very heart of who I am. I'm not safe. It's not okay. I'm not safe. Help, help. I need help. Can you help me, please? Don't leave me. Don't leave me behind. I'm not going to be able to cope on my own. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. It's too hard for me. Please, someone, help, help. I'm in the dark. I was feeling that, and I was crying, and I could see myself, and I remember saying to my therapist once, I cannot love my inner child. I cannot love myself. I'm angry, even though I think about myself as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, and I knew how much I was suffering. If I look at a picture of myself at that time, I feel disgusted. I can't help but feel disgusted, but that went away. I was just there holding myself. So that was a powerful, extraordinary day. By day 8, my self-discipline was faltering. By day 9, I had a lion, and I was a bit pissed off with myself about that. And then I had the most blissful meditation so far, transcending all of the pain, no identification, no ego, just these waves of beautiful, blissful vibrations. And the thing is, remember I told you, you must practice not being averse to the painful sensations. Similarly, you cannot become attached to the positive experiences. And that was really, really hard not to attach to, because it was so blissful. Oh my gosh. It's completely straight back, no fear of slumping, no pain in the legs. You name a body part, you could feel it. You could feel everything. And by that point, you're not doing part by part, piece by piece. You are just free flowing, head to feet in one single sweep. And you can feel everything. Your body is alive with sensations. And then I went for a walk after that, day 9, and more tears started. And this time, the first round of tears came from, I am not safe. And because I had finally connected with my traumatized inner child, I told myself, I'm safe now. It's okay. I'm safe. It's okay. I saw who I was. And this is why I was able to renounce my imposter syndrome and realize I'm not this terrible person. I'm scared that I am, relying upon the perceptions of others who don't like me, people who have turned against me, who think I'm this evil person, worried that they're true, whilst failing to realize that often when we feel something, anger or fear, we focus on the object of anger and fear. Vipassana meditation teaches you that there is only the anger and fear. Can you be with that? Can you focus on your breath and observe the sensations objectively without paying much attention to the object of anger and fear? Rather than, I hate that person, I hate that time in my life, I hate myself. Can you focus on the hate? Can you focus on the anger and understand that everything is impermanent? And that's when you realize focusing on the bodily sensations absolutely correlates to the emotional and mental aspect of life. If I can see myself objectively, and that's what Vipassana means, seeing things as they are. If I can see myself as objectively as possible and see that I'm not this bad person, then the perceptions of those who have turned against me mean nothing, because they're not grounded in the truth. They are biased and driven by emotion and sankhara, blind reaction. And we can renounce our imposter syndrome when we dare to delve deep within us and see ourselves for who we really are. And when you know the truth, nothing on the outside can ever hurt you again. Then by day 9, and this was more focusing on, is it okay to be me? Is it not okay to be me? I realized it was, and I realized how much of a hard time I'd given myself. And I was crying again, holding a tree. And as cringy as this may sound to some of you, I looked at myself and I said, Harry, you're beautiful. You know, I'd never said that to myself before. I'm always giving myself a hard time for not meeting my impossibly high standards of perfection. I have an internalized sergeant major. I have an internalized private school teacher. Never good enough. I'm never good enough. And I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm so dependent on distraction to help guide me away from sitting with myself in my unvarnished truth. So that was powerful. And you get so sensitive. And and then I started crying for everyone I knew who I knew had a hard time. My empathy knew no bounds. My compassion knew no bounds. I was thinking about everyone I loved. And I was thinking about people I knew who were in pain, people who had hurt me. You know, people who had hurt me in the past. I understood and I knew that they did so because they were experiencing pain. And because you manage to, you can renounce the ego, you renounce the sense of self, and then it's not, you don't feel like, you hurt me, how dare you? You realize how self-important you can be when you retain the ego. You know, there was, and I've often said that, you know, people hurt people. And I wasn't just intellectualizing it as I usually do, because if they've hurt me and it's coming from a place of pain, I cried for them because they were feeling pain. I wasn't crying because they'd hurt me. There is no me. And I was thinking about everyone I knew, and I just wanted everyone to be well. I wanted everyone to feel loved and cared for. I wanted to make sure everyone was safe and okay. And I was so hypersensitive. You know, a man looked at me, he wasn't supposed to because we were still in noble silence, and he smiled, and he smiled at me, and I cried because I allowed myself to receive his kindness. I allowed myself to receive his compassion. And everything was making me cry. Everything was. I was so touched by everything. And I said, it is okay. Harry, you're beautiful. It's okay. You don't have to keep trying so hard. It is okay. Chill. Look at the things you've done. Look at the things you've achieved. Look at who you are. And I just cried. I said, I never ever focus on these things. You know, I'm always trying to achieve something. I'm so distracted by trying to achieve something whilst forgetting to realize it's okay. It's okay. The baseline is sufficient. By day 10, after the first group sitting, we were introduced to metta meditation, which is loving kindness, which I've done many times before. They taught it in a slightly different way to what I was familiar with. In a nutshell, this is how I was originally taught. First, focus on someone you love and send them all the love and kindness in the world. Then focus on someone towards whom you feel neutral and send them an equal amount of love and kindness. Then think of someone you don't like or someone who makes you angry, right? And you get to a point in meditation where you don't have any anger and resentment to convey to people, because you realize how toxic and destructive it is. Even the people you don't get on with, you just have this abundance of love and care for. And then finally you think of yourself and send yourself love, care and compassion. Well, not finally, because finally you send it to everyone. May all beings be happy. And then after that we came out of noble silence. And initially I felt like I was experiencing culture shock because I hadn't spoken in so long. Speaking was tremendously difficult. And there were large groups of people gathering outside the dining hall, and I couldn't handle that. So I went straight back to the hall, and there was a man outside, and I spoke to him. And then I spoke to some other people. I had some really, really wonderful conversations with people. You know, one man had an autistic, thought he had an autistic father. So I was like, oh, you're literally the perfect person for me to speak to right here, right now. So we spoke about that, and oh God, I was so excited. I can speak about autistic people again. Yes. And that really helped me ease back into, you know, normal life. It's good that we had that day to come out of silence, because I think if we came out of silence on the day we left, that would have been too much. because you're feeling very, very, very vulnerable, very fragile, you know. So I spoke to a lot of people and we shared our experiences, and it was interesting to realize how similar our experiences were. You know, Gwenkaji's discourses every evening would show us that, oh wow, gosh, there is such commonality between all of us. And he said, you know, you can't open your eyes during meditation. You can't speak to other people about your experiences during the course. Why? Because you'll start comparing yourselves to each other, and you'll think, oh, they witnessed a bright light come to them during meditation and I didn't. That means I'm not doing it as well. You know, you really need to cultivate the idea that you're working in isolation, because it is such a personal journey. So I spoke to a lot of people. I mean, we were meditating a bit on day 10. I was not meditating myself. You know, I was, so many people weren't, because you have this sense that the course is over now. We're talking to each other. Oh gosh, I can't speak to anyone. You know, I can't, I can't meditate now. And the most extraordinary thing happened on the last day. There was a squirrel who was completely tame. A really cute squirrel that didn't look fully grown was jumping onto people's shoes. And if you put your hand out to the squirrel, it came over and you could pick the squirrel up and stroke the squirrel. And then the squirrel followed us into the meditation hall for one of the last meditations, was running around, and the teachers kept on having to, you know, shut the doors, get the squirrel out. Then it ran right around the building and came in halfway through on the female side. And one of the women kind of shrieked, you know, and everyone was laughing, and the teachers were getting a little irate, I think, at that point. But it's like, look, this is a squirrel who loves human beings. I'm sorry, because the teacher was saying, work seriously. I'm saying, whoa, 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 whoa. This is, when have you ever witnessed a squirrel who actually enjoys and seeks out human company and wants to be stroked and played with and is following us around everywhere? I've never seen anything like it. So, you know, a bit of magic. You know, we spent that day just catching up with people, you know, having dinner, and it was really, really, it was one that, you know, there was such a sense of solidarity and communion with the others, because we'd all just been through the same thing. You know, I think we found out that about 4 or 5 of the students left because they couldn't deal with it. And you do feel like leaving at certain points. You do feel like you're going crazy. And you have to notice that this is all part of the sankhara. This is all part of the blind reaction. I'm not happy with the way things are right now. And I've tricked myself into thinking something on the outside will be the answer to all your problems, right? And then by day 11, after a final meditation and a final discourse from Gwenkaji, 6:30 struck and we were free to go. Breakfast was served and I got my phone out of the locker. I didn't turn it on straight away. I just placed it beside me as I ate my food. You know, I packed my bag the night before. And I finished my breakfast. I went and packed my car up, filled up my water bottle, and then I sat in my car and I finally turned my phone on and spoke to a couple of people. You know, the first person I spoke to, I'd known for years. We go back a long, long way. I was once very, very close to this person, and you know, I started welling up again. You know, the first person I spoke to, and I was just so grateful. I really, really felt grateful. I never feel satisfied, you know, and I just felt in that moment, I am satisfied. I'm so grateful for the people in my life. I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do that course. That 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat was the most important thing I ever did for myself. And it wasn't all smooth sailing. I felt like I fucked up a couple of times. At first, I felt guilty about it, but the guilt is there to teach you. Why are you guilty? How have you failed? Why do you feel like a failure? Why don't you feel safe? Why is it not okay to be you? And through direct experience of observing your bodily sensations at the subtlest level, you do experience these regular upwellings of insight, and those questions are answered. And because they're answered, it helps you to heal. It helps you to be with yourself and not resist anything and not feel bombarded by the many distractions that plague us in our everyday lives. And then I didn't listen to any music for 10 days. And after I spoke to, you know, that person who will always be very, very dear to my heart, I played some Freddie Mercury and started my car, you know, entered my address into maps and drove off. And I could finally sing, and I was so happy and grateful to be able to sing. And I was listening to Freddie Mercury's voice, and I was, you know, blaring it out of the speakers and belting it for the first time in 11 days technically, because it started on day 0 and we left on day 11. And I felt good. I felt happy. Most importantly, I felt safe, and I do feel safe. It's okay to be me. So I can't recommend that course highly enough. 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat. If you're interested, Google. It'll come up immediately. There are 2 centres in the UK. I was at the one in Herefordshire. Emma. And yes, Ocean Love Dharma Deepa, which means the island of universal law in Sanskrit. There we go. And I'm very tired, bordering on burnt out. And I'm having I'm back to work, but I'm having a physical rest in a sense, but I will be continuing to practice Dharma, Vipassana. And that's it really. That's my story. I hope this has been at least a bit helpful for some of you. The experience was tremendously powerful and helpful for me. I am so glad I did it. And there's so many people I know who, I know need to do it, you know. But there we go. Okay. Thank you all for listening. Yeah, I'm back now, as I've said before. And I think I'll see you all next tomorrow evening. I'm doing a live with Sam Harris and Lenara, I believe. Awesome. Bye now.